Good afternoon. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and happy Veterans Day. And I would like to refer to Superintendent Thomas to welcome us, and then we'll have our pledge.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And as you mentioned, and as everyone knows, today being Veterans Day, we'd like to just take a minute and honor the folks that have served in our country. We know that many folks didn't come home and fought for the rights that we have today, and certainly we appreciate their service, also the service of folks who did come home. There might be some folks in the audience who served in the military, and maybe if there's some folks outside this main entrance, if you could come in, I'd like for everyone who served in the military to stand for a minute and let us recognize you and thank you for your service. Oh, okay. Not coming in. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your service. And now we'll have the moment of silence and pledge led by Mr. Watson.
Stand for a moment of silence. Turn the flag to the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the Board of Education's November 11th regular session meeting. We appreciate everyone who is here and everyone who's watching the live stream. Thanks for being here. Also, once again, we'd like to welcome newly elected District 6 Board Member Betsy Henderson. There she is. Thank you, Betsy, for being here. It is our understanding that the election results will be certified by November 23rd, so an installation ceremony will be confirmed after that date, and details will be shared as soon as possible. We have several other announcements. We have upcoming committee meetings. The Special Question Committee will meet next Tuesday, November 17th at 4 p.m. The Joint Education Committee will meet on Monday, December 7th at 5:30 p.m. And the Naming Facilities Committee will meet on Monday, December 14th at 10 a.m. Also, our next policy review meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, November 18th at 1:30 p.m. And that meeting, along with the other committee meetings mentioned, will be held in this Andrew Johnson boardroom. Excuse me. And as you know, we've been focusing on our vision and mission, and I'd like to refer to Ms. Satterfield. If you could give us your insights on our vision and mission.
Thank you, Board Chair. So our vision, to grow lifelong learners who contribute their talents, strengths, and skills to build a stronger community. Our mission, to provide excellent and accessible learning opportunities that empower all students to realize their full potential. Reading over the vision and the mission statement, I found a few words that stuck out: contribute, stronger, and full potential. I also noticed that we have our listed in front of mission and vision. So it reads our mission and our vision. Not sure if that was intentional. I don't remember us having an in-depth conversation about that, but I think it's powerful because it expresses ownership and inclusivity. Last week, the public witnessed board members advocating for a school outside of their own personal elected district. These were comments that I received in emails, and they were very happy about that. We do it often, but it was greatly noticed last week. That is a sense of ownership that leads to stronger communities across Knox County. I challenge my fellow board members and myself to keep it up. Continue to be informed and stay informed about the needs across our entire district. With that mindset, that is how the board achieves our full potential. So
thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, we have just one change, I think, to the agenda. You should have received an email notice about a couple of items, a couple agenda changes to include the addition of item 12D, a contract with the Tennessee Department of Education, allowing them to reimburse Knox County Schools for participation in the Mentor Matters Recruitment Initiation for the previous 2 school years, and also our discussion about quarantine protocols being moved to item 13A, or the first regular agenda item. Are there any other requested changes to this agenda? Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to add something without objection as, I guess, the last item. It would be, 13J.
Okay.
I would like for us to look, this is a separate thing from what we're going to talk about, the quarantine.
Okay.
I would like for us to look at what we're doing in regard to extracurricular groups and from a standpoint of fairness and uniformity.
Okay.
And I'll have some words to say about it when we get to it.
Okay, certainly. Any objection to
Thank
that? Okay. Okay. So we'll add that one. And any other changes or additions? Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. McMillan and a second by Ms. Christie. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and now we have some special recognitions, and I would like to refer to Superintendent Thomas for our first recognition.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. It's always a privilege to highlight outstanding students and leaders within our district, and there are several people here tonight that fit that description. First of all, I'd like to recognize several members of our finance and human resources team, and maybe if you would come forward as I'm talking here, call your name, and then we'll get a photo as well. But first of all, we've got Scott Bolton. You know Scott. Scott's our Executive Director for Human Resources. And Ginger Griffin. Ginger, where's Ginger? There's Ginger, who's our grant accountant. And Chris Simons. Chris is our Supervisor of Accounting. Joe Snyder. Joe's our Budget Director. They've all been designated as Certified County Finance Officer graduates. And to receive this designation from the State Comptroller's Office, these team members had to complete a rigorous, and I heard a lot about the exams and quizzes they took, education program, and then passed an exam that focused on topics including budgeting, governmental accounting, internal control and audit, and purchasing and risk management. So achieving this designation required a lot of hard work and commitment on our part, and I know that all these folks are going to help us continue to be good stewards of the financial resources that have been entrusted to us. So please join me in congratulating Scott, Ginger, Chris, and Joe. Put my mask on. Take a photo here. Okay, to save a little time, I'll just I'll stand right here and I'll save a few minutes. Second, very proud to introduce Dr. Keith Wilson. I know all of you know Dr. Wilson, who's the district's Director of Career and Technical Education. Earlier this year, Dr. Wilson was recognized by the Tennessee Department of Education as the Supervisor of the Year for the East Tennessee Core Region, which is a really prestigious honor. CTE, of course, as we all know, is an essential part of our education mission, and Dr. Wilson's dedication and innovative thinking are crucial to its success, and this is really a great honor. So I told Keith this about 3 years ago. Where's Keith? There he is. Keith, we want the best TTE program in the country, and I think Chris has taken steps to help get us there. So he does an excellent job. I know we had something going on that afternoon. I didn't get to watch the ceremony. They did virtual, but Dr. Riswick told me Keith should have won. So you're a winner, certainly a winner in our hearts. So Keith, if you'll come up, I'd like to recognize you and also present you with a certificate. Okay, last but certainly not least, I'd like to recognize Avery Burnham, who's a senior at South Doyle High School, where he also serves as senior cadet in the ROTC program. So, Avery, yeah, come on up. Okay, and also First Sergeant Hartwell and Lieutenant Colonel Woodcock joining Avery. So, Avery, come front and center. Let me talk about you just a second. So he was recently awarded the Legion of Valor Bronze Cross, which recognizes cadets who demonstrate excellence in military, scholastic, and civic affairs. And what makes this even more impressive is that only 29 cadets across the country were approved for the award this year out of more than 305,000 who participated in the Army ROTC program. So congratulations, Avery. So. Additionally, Avery has maintained a 4.38 GPA, captain of the cross-country team, and president of the National Honor Society. He's also been awarded an Army ROTC scholarship to attend the University of Tennessee, Knoxville after high school. So again, congratulations, Avery. And I also want to formally apologize to Avery and to also Lieutenant Woodcock. I was invited to the ceremony at South Doyle High School that morning, and I failed to attend, so I wanted to publicly and formally apologize to you for not being in attendance. I know Mr. Oakes was there representing Central Office, but certainly very proud of you and all of your accomplishments, and we look forward to hearing many great things from you in the future. So thank you. And at this time, Lieutenant Colonel Woodcock and First Sergeant.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. It's exciting to be able to recognize wonderful people. So what a highlight of our day. And now I'd like to refer to Ms. Coatney for the reading of the agenda.
Item 9, consent agenda.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve by Ms. Christie and a second by Mr. McMillan. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 10A, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-341, Uniform Grading Policy as amended.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Babb. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10B, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-351, Credit Recovery as amended.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Babb. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10C, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-373, Graduating with Honors or Distinction as amended.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Babb. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10D, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J130, Home Schools as amended.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Babb. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10E, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J150, School Admissions as amended.
We have a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10F, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J151, Student Assignment as amended.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
10G, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J194, zero tolerance, as amended.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie and a second by Ms. Babb. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
10H, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J280, alternative school programs, as amended.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. Watson. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
10I, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J400, child abuse and neglect, as amended.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Owen. Ms. Owen?
Yes, I just want to say I appreciate adding the language that we added to the policy 580. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Oh, we need to take a vote on that. Any other discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
10J, approve second reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy J580, student suicide prevention, as amended.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Christie. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
10K, approve first reading of Knox County Board of Education Policy I-381, integration of TCAP and EOC scores in student grades, as amended.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Mr. McMillan. Discussion? Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
11A, approve grant agreement with the NEA Foundation for receipt of a COVID-19 response student success grant for Southville High School in the amount of $5,000 to support AP Computer Science principals and the Robotics Course Club.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Owen. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
11B, approve Dollar General Literacy Foundation grant in the amount of $4,000 for Knox County Schools Library Media Services designated to the purchase of books for school libraries.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie. I believe the second one was Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
11C, approve Dollar General Literacy Foundation grant in the amount of $2,000 for West Haven Elementary School designated to the purchase of books for the school's library.
We have a motion by Mr. Watson, a second by Ms. Christie. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
12A, approve contract with System Integrations for an access control system at an estimated cost of $680,571 for fiscal year 2021, and not to exceed funds allocated in the capital improvement plan budget during the remaining years of the term of November 1, 2020 through October 31, 2023, which may be renewed for 2 additional one-year option periods for a total of 5 years.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie and a second by Ms. Owen. Do we have discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
12B, approve contract with Skilled Services LLC for structural stabilization services at a cost not to exceed $250,000 for fiscal year 2021, and not to exceed funds allocated in the general purpose and capital improvement plan budgets for the term of December 1, 2020 through November 20, 2021, which may be extended for 4 additional years, 1 year at a time, for a total of 5 years.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie and a second by Ms. Babb. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
12C, approve contract with School and Office Supply for stage curtains and rigging services not to exceed funds allocated in the fiscal year 2021 general purpose and capital improvement plan budgets for the term of November 12, 2020 through November 11, 2021, which may be extended for 4 additional years, 1 year at a time, for a total of 5 years.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Owen and a second by Ms. Christie. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
12D, approve contract with the State of Tennessee Department of Education to allow reimbursement of $3,200 to Knox County Schools for participation in the Mentors Matter recruitment initiative during the 2018-2019 and 2019-2020 school years.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Satterfield, a second by Ms. Christie. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 13A, discussion on quarantine protocols.
And we have someone for public forum on this item.
Okay.
Angie Guthart? It's Garthart, sorry about that. If you will just come up and say your name, state your name and county of residence, and you will have 5 minutes to speak.
Hi, my name is Angie Gerthert, and I am a Knox County resident, live in Gulf Park subdivision. I had the privilege, I guess I should say first, I've been at this building twice today. And if you had told me that I was going to do that months ago, there is no way I would have believed you. But I had the privilege of meeting with some of the executive team, and you heard my last name, so I know their first names, Renee and Tammy and Janice and Jason, and I got to meet with them today. And first let me say how blessed I feel after meeting with them. What an amazing group of people we have looking out for our kids. And I can't really say that enough, I mean, after meeting with them. So when I stand up here and I tell you all things, you know, I don't have any letters after my name. I don't have any of that. But I'm a wife, a mom, and I'm a daughter. And I started asking questions a long time ago because for my sanity, I felt like I had to ask questions. And so I've continued to ask questions. And I put out about, I guess it's been about 12 days, just Facebook, I just asked parents. I said, hey, have any of your kids been quarantined? And I did not, I really didn't fathom what was going to happen. But as of when I met with them this morning, I had a count of 2,004 kids who were quarantined that never got sick, and 179 teachers who were quarantined and never got sick. As of this afternoon, the student number is up to 2,176 kids. Out of that list, there are at least 4 of them that have been quarantined more than one time, which in the short amount of time we've been in school is a very long time for them. And I understand that there's fear, and I get it, but our kids, you guys fought so hard to have them in the building. We need them in the building. We need them there. They're fighting to be there. They're doing everything that you tell them to do. But so that little post that I made was pretty eye-opening to me. And if there were that many that shared with me, how many are there that aren't? That just kept their kids home for 2 weeks. They got behind in learning. They got behind in everything else. And I know we don't want that. So we want them to be in the building. So again, thank you all so much for what you do. It's a terribly hard job, and I appreciate all the time that you all spend on it. I really, really do. And I'm so grateful to my new friends that I met this morning. So because I know that I'll probably see them again. So thank you guys so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right. So this was, I wanted to add this item because I've continued to hear from parents and community members, and I am really very thankful for the partnership and for our team here at Knox County Schools who have done an excellent job. And Angie, I'm glad you got to see that, witness it, because most people don't get to, and they are amazing people. So I'm thankful for the partnership that Knox County Schools has with the Knox County Health Department. And I think that most people are amazed that numbers have been really as low as they have, and that putting aside the quarantine issue with just the number of cases that we have, they've been low in our schools. And so I think that's been surprising to a lot of people, and it's because of so much hard work that's gone into that by our staff. At our September 2-day work session, I raised a concern, and Dr. Buchanan was gracious enough to come and speak to us at our work session, and I raised the concern about so many healthy kids being quarantined, and that's still my concern. And at this point where we are now, we have a lot more data than we did then, and from the evidence that I've seen, it's clear that students who are quarantined because of a contact with a positive student at school are not getting sick. And according to the information I've seen listed in the medical arena, if you go into Covenant facilities, you see a little graph that shows what the levels of risks are. So if you have a person with 2 people with a mask, that's termed as an extremely low risk situation. So many, and so because of the low risk situation that our students are in, I think that's part of why, parents continue to be concerned about the thousands and thousands of students that are at home each week, and then we don't see those healthy students actually becoming sick. And I understand the nature of quarantine involves healthy people who may get sick. But what I think is missing from that equation is that in this country, we don't wear masks. So if healthcare professionals have quarantined people in the past, it hasn't been with the understanding that both parties were wearing a mask. So if you have an extremely low risk situation, that seems to me that that should come into bear. So the students that who are quarantined and then becoming sick, like I said, is extremely small. So I've like Angie stated, I've heard from parents who have had children who've quarantined at least 3 times, like several who have quarantined 3 times. So if you think about that, we've only been in school less than 10 weeks. So those kids have missed 4 to 6 weeks of school. That's a significant number of school days. And so, yes, the teachers are bending over backwards to make sure that those students are staying up to date, but it's extremely challenging and difficult. And so I'm very concerned about the academic losses that will be experienced because of missed time in the classroom. I'm joined by a lot of parents who are concerned about the student academics, and we know that learning suffers when kids aren't in the classroom. In addition, we continue to hear about the mental health of students as a huge concern, and students just living in fear of being quarantined. They're scared to death that they're going to be quarantined. And, what will be the lasting effects of that kind of fear? We won't know that for a while. 5 or 6 weeks ago, the Putnam County Board of Education made a change to their reopening plan that basically stated that they would not be assisting the health department with identifying students to quarantine. So students who were sick at school, who were in contact with a positive case at school, they chose to no longer assist in quarantining kids. So even though their community numbers have increased, the student cases have stayed very low. I've talked to the board chair there several times. If you look at their dashboard, currently they have 0.32% of their students who are positive, which for them is 28 kids, and about 2% of their teachers and students are in quarantine or isolated. So, of course, you could, they still have family members who may be ill, so they would be quarantined for that purpose. So you'll still have some quarantine kids. They would still have quarantine kids in that scenario. They have continued to notify parents if there is a positive case in the child's classroom, so that parents can monitor their students closely if they have been in close proximity to a student who tested positive. And so I would really like to see our board discuss what Putnam County has done and look at whether now that we have more data, whether we need to continue in the path that we're on or whether we need to make a change. So that's why I wanted to bring this topic, and I would love to hear your all's thoughts on this subject. Dr. Buchanan is here, and she, I know we have questions, and I expressed to her that we continue to hear about contact tracing that maybe isn't what you would expect. Maybe there's something out of the ordinary, and it's difficult to train all these people to do something and then expect them to do it perfectly. So there are issues there. So if you have questions on that. So I asked Dr. Buchanan to look and see if she had data that she would like to share, and I'm not sure if she does, but about what the health department may see of children who have been quarantined with an exposure at school and then whether they've gotten sick or not. Dr. Buchanan, did you have anything you'd like to share?
I can speak to what you just spoke to. Thank you. Thank you for allowing me some time to speak to you. I'm Dr. Martha Buchanan with the Health Department, and for those of you who might not know, our data, school data is in with all the rest of our data. So to pull that school data out specifically is a very heavy lift for my staff, who yesterday had the highest new cases we've had since COVID started, which is part of my point. We're not in a place where I believe we need to be changing things. The schools may be able to pull that data. I didn't ask them, but to pull that data for my staff right now is just not a reasonable request. But I think what I want you to hear from me is that, you know, just because you don't have, quarantine is for well people. That's the whole point of quarantine. You don't have the disease yet. We want to keep you from getting the disease, but we want to keep other people from getting the disease from you, just in case you do get it. We use it for lots of other things, not just COVID. And it works, and it's working. So your cases in your schools are low, in part because of quarantine. I firmly believe that. In part because Lisa Wagner and her team, working with my team, are very quickly identifying cases and isolating them and quarantining those at risk. It's working, so we have low case counts. That's fabulous. My bigger concern is also about our community. I have to look at our entire community and the risk that this poses to grandma and grandpa and mom and dad and baby sister or whoever it is that's at home. The risk of not quarantining and not identifying those, maybe it is a few, but those few children, students who do develop symptoms, who do become cases of COVID, they haven't exposed any more people because they've been in quarantine. So they haven't exposed the grandma, they haven't exposed whoever else, they haven't exposed other students, they haven't exposed teachers. So that helps reduce your case counts. And so that, it's working. So in the United States, there have been more than 2,000 cases of COVID in children between the ages of 5 and 17. In Knox County, the number's lower. It's been about more than 1,000, actually more than 1,500 cases between 0 and 17 if you look at our data. And like I said, we had our highest number of new cases and hospitalizations yesterday. And our numbers are going up at a rate that is not what we want to see. And so our average cases per 100,000, our 14-day average is 28. That's the highest we've had. So that's quite high, 28 new cases per 100,000 population. Knox County's population is 4,600, something a little more than that. Flu season is upon us. We know what happens during flu season. We end up closing schools mostly because of staff absenteeism, not usually out of student absenteeism. And I would say that full body of evidence to allow us to safely make this change is not there. They're working on it. There's some evidence pointing in the direction that it might be reasonable to make such a change, but it's not there. So the full evidence isn't there. I've looked, my staff has looked. There is some data to support this concept. There's some data to support some other things. I know UT is participating in a research study for college-age students to look at quarantine, and there are studies on school-age children and reducing quarantine. And when the evidence is there, we will happily make a change and support a change. At this time, I don't believe it's the right time to make a change, and I don't believe the evidence supports a change. Obviously, you all look at the schools and look at your data and consider what you want to do. We will continue, no matter what you decide, we will continue to work with Knox County Schools. We have a great existing partnership with them way before COVID, around meningitis and flu and noro and you name it, and other things, not just outbreaks. So that's really, we're following current CDC guidance. I will continue to recommend that we follow the current Tennessee Department of Health and CDC guidance.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's hear from some board members. I don't know who was first. Ms. Mounds? Okay.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate you putting this on the agenda, Susan, and I appreciate comments from those, Dr. Buchanan and our guest Angie as well. The numbers that I had been provided, since Dr. Buchanan said that's a heavy lift right now for her department, the numbers that I had been provided by Knox County, and I'm not saying this is a totally scientific study, but what I have is that there's been 5,267 kids quarantined since the beginning of school, 5,267. And out of those 5,267, we have produced 26 students that tested positive after being quarantined. 26 versus 5,267. Out of 90 schools, we have 13 schools that show that there was a case that was quarantined and then tested positive. And I'm not sure even that's what they could pull for me. But that being said, there's no, I guess, evidence that that positive was a result of that contact in the school. Does that make sense? So while they were quarantined, having had exposure to someone in their class, and then tested positive in varying days afterwards during that period, I think that's a very low number. It really concerns me, and I would support this board seriously looking at, I'm not opposed to contact tracing. I think it's very important to let parents know that their child has been exposed and for them to be watching them very closely so as not to send them to school if they're sick. But I think as a board, our job is to educate the students of Knox County. And while I appreciate our health professionals looking out for the entire county as a whole and the health of our students, given what Bob said, given what we know, given what parents are telling us, and in spite of our teachers doing the very best they can, I feel like our students are not receiving the education they should be. And as you said, Ms. Horn, I've been contacted by multiple parents whose kids have had to quarantine multiple times, and some have done well and some have not, and they're very concerned about their children that are getting very behind. So just wanted to bring those numbers to the board and in consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bounds. I think Ms. Owen, did you have your mic down early?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I was redoing the math with new numbers. And we all know I'm not a mathematician. So looking just lightly at the numbers we're talking about, somewhere between 2,000 and 5,200 students. We're talking about between 3.5% and about 9% of our students.
Who've
been quarantined.
Okay.
So those numbers, when we hear 5,000 students, that sounds really, really huge. That sounds like, I mean, that's far more than some of our counties even have students. But for us, we're talking about around 8.9% of our students. So looking at it that way may put it in a little better perspective. That those students haven't become sick, we don't necessarily know that. We may know that they haven't become symptomatic, but whether they were actually positive, we don't know unless they were tested. And so without us knowing how many of those students were tested, unless they were all tested, we can't accurately say that a very small number were positive. We don't have a way to know that unless they were tested. So we all know that students come to school sick quite often. We all know that a lot of times it's just, oh, it's just the sniffles, it's okay. And then we find out they're quite ill later. Looking at the spread and the numbers in the community, I think it would be really irresponsible to take these numbers out of context and assume that these students were not positive when we don't have that information. What we're really missing is that data on whether those quarantined people ever became positive. Whether they became symptomatic is a completely different question. And whether they became symptomatic doesn't determine whether they were contagious. It's whether they actually became positive. And that information we don't have. Yes, we know that learning suffers when students are not in school. We know that. We have evidence for decades on that. However, to keep our students who may be positive and no way to know, to keep them contacting more and more students and to allow that spread in the community to continue, I think would be horribly irresponsible of us. We're looking at some anecdotal evidence for something that we have broad scientific evidence for. We can't take small anecdotal evidence to make broad scientific decisions. That just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Okay, I think Ms. Babb was next.
Sure. I'll just say at the forefront, I probably agree with everybody here. I am hearing from a lot of people. Actually, today I heard from people on both sides of it because they were concerned we were talking about this tonight. But I've had lots of friends. I've had my own family members quarantined. I've seen the ill effects of it. I don't like the number of kids that we are contact tracing. However, being said that, I am not a medical professional. I don't feel like, well, maybe Christy is a nurse, but most of us are not on this board. And I do really believe in listening to the experts out there, which is our health department, who has been following guidelines of the CDC. With that being said, I really, I'm getting forwarded articles, and, you can find anything you want on the internet, but then I do think there's some very credible studies out there that I think Dr. Buchanan alluded to a little bit, that there are things going on that I think are pointing to, hopefully, maybe we can change some of our restrictions. I mean, I would love to see if we can show proof of it, that with the masks in the classroom, that maybe it's okay not to do the contact tracing. If you're sitting at lunch with somebody with your mask off, that's a different story. Or, or maybe reducing the 6 feet down to 2 feet or something, which would hugely affect the number of kids quarantined. So with that being said, I totally see what Ms. Horn and Ms. Bounds are talking about, because I'm seeing it in my community. I'm hearing from people, but I personally am going to side with following the guidelines set forth with the health department. One other thing I would like to point out is we just had people in our community decide whether to go back to school or not go back to school to change. And I've had several people contact me saying they based their decision on protocols that were currently in effect. That if we change our protocols, I do think we're going to have to open it up to parents who do not feel safe any longer sending their kids back to school. So I do think that's going to be kind of something, if this board chooses to change the way we're doing things, I do think we're going to have to look at the decision we just made people make, because they made that under different guidelines.
Okay. Mr. Watson, and then we'll come to Mr. McMillan.
I think Mr. McMillan was actually
Were you
first.
first?
Go ahead, let him
Okay,
speak.
go ahead, Mr. Watson.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. So I'm certainly not a medical professional, but I deeply appreciate our medical professionals, maybe more now during this season than ever. I was always that guy that never went to the doctor intentionally, because it's like, if I'm not feeling it, why do I need them? So I appreciate, to the degree that the medical professionals in our communities have moved to the forefront, because I think we're understanding the pressure that they're on to a new degree. And I want to speak just personally for just a second. My daughter has been quarantined twice now, and my son is currently quarantined. Once was contact traced through the schools, another through the youth development program. But either way, I've adjusted everything in my life to sit down with my daughter for 14 days straight to make sure that she doesn't suffer tremendous learning loss. And to be frank, she doesn't want me to say this, but she has. And it's been devastating, and it has impacted every aspect of our life. And, you know, I have a good paying job, and I'm married, and I've got a spouse that's very supportive, and I live in a good community. And, you know, I don't have a lot of those struggles that some families in our communities experience. That being said, I don't think this conversation is in the realm of education that we're having tonight. I don't think this is a conversation that educators or people who are vested in education are the ones that should be setting the tone. I think that's our health department. And if my daughter is quarantined again, I'm going to hate it, and I'm going to drudge through it. And she's probably going to suffer more learning loss. But I can't imagine moving against the guidance of our public health officials. And Dr. Buchanan, I have a question for you. Is there anything that has shifted in our practice around contact tracing since March, specifically within schools, but in the community as a whole? Like, are we doing anything different in the way that we're doing that?
We actually haven't shifted very much. I think if anything in the schools, we've gotten a little more surgical, for lack of a better word, as we have gotten better at asking the right questions and being more specific. I have a team dedicated just to school contact tracing, who works directly with Lisa Wagner and her team, and they do everything they can to minimize the number of students that have to be quarantined. And the schools have gotten better too. Early on, we had some instances where things happened and they had like a bunch of kids in one room all together that was way too small. Those things haven't happened again. So the schools have actually changed their practices so that if there's a case in that, you know, because what happened now, these kids were in this tiny space and there was a person who was positive in there. So all of those kids had to be quarantined. It was crazy. Schools aren't doing that anymore. Schools are learning as they go as well, and taking steps to reduce the number of kids that have to be quarantined. We haven't really changed anything because the guidance hasn't changed. I know the 15-minute cumulative thing, I know worried a lot of you. We were kind of already looking at that at school. We were already considering the fact that they were there all day and for several hours in the same classroom next to the same kids or children. And so it has not changed. The number of students that we quarantine per student hasn't gone up since that changed. So that's important for you to know. We were kind of already looking at that because we used the seating chart and talked to the teachers and understand, you know, where the kids are and, you know, who was there and who wasn't there and who's absent and who's not and all of that.
So I'm not surprised that the methodology's not changed because you all been doing contact tracing way before COVID, correct?
Yes.
But our quality and our effectiveness and our fidelity at doing it within this context has improved, right? We've become more effective.
I would say yes.
That we've actually been doing that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. I appreciate that. Sure. And also, I think it's a valid point, and I want you to, if I'm hearing you correctly, I want you to kind of say it one more time. One of the reasons why we're experiencing some of the things that we're experiencing from a count perspective in Knox County schools is because we are doing these things, correct?
Absolutely.
So I think it's an interesting comment. I've heard this a bunch in the community, and I've heard a lot of parents. I mean, we all have. We've got a lot of parents that have emailed us and contacted us, and as I just described my own situation, I honestly feel for them. I totally get it in every regard. But the argument that I sometimes hear is, hey, but look, it's not that bad. And I'm like, well, yeah, because we're doing stuff, right? Like if we back away from the things that make it not that bad, then it's going to get worse. Is that true from a public health standpoint?
That is true. That's certainly our concern that backing away from what we're doing will increase the cases of the number of students and staff that are ill in the schools that have COVID. And, you know, we feel for the parents and students as well. I have staff members, team members whose kids have been quarantined more than once also. Yeah. And they've had to manage that. And it's hard. And it's hard when you have to miss your softball tournament or your basketball tournament or your chess tournament or whatever it is you're missing because you're quarantined. But it's where we are right now. As a community, as a nation, we are in this place where things need to be different for us to be able to move forward successfully.
Yeah. And Ms. Owen made the statement, but if it's true, would you mind validating it? She made the statement that there's a difference between numbers of students that have proven to be symptomatic who have been contact traced versus ones who have been positive. And we really don't know how many kids may have been positive who have been contact traced. Is that correct?
That's true. We don't know, and for a couple of reasons. One is not all of them get tested.
Right.
We're not able, because of the volume, 200 plus cases yesterday and 100 plus cases every day for the past several days, we're not able, due to volume, to really do that detailed. When we have a little outbreak, like in one school or a couple of schools, we can get a lot of detail and learn a lot more about that.
Right.
But we don't get that, we don't have that really good follow-up, unfortunately, partly due to volume.
Yeah, and I've also know that for some folks, there's a reluctance to either get tested or say, man, I'm not feeling well or whatever, right? Because we've been through this long enough that people understand the implications of saying those things or doing those things. And so I think that also adds to the discussion is, and I'm not faulting those people, I get it. I mean, there's real world consequences to raising your hand and saying, yep, that's me, or I'm going to go get tested. But I do think it adds to the validity that I don't know that we really have accurate data. And what I'm hearing from you is consistent from when we heard from you a couple months ago, in that the data's coming in, we're analyzing it, we're going to make decisions when we feel like we can. But Dr. Buchanan, in fairness to you, you're not sitting there just thinking, man, I'm going to make this as hard as I can, right?
No.
I mean, are you doing that?
Not at all.
No, you don't look like you do that. I mean, we've never had coffee, but you just don't seem like you're doing that.
No.
So, okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a couple of questions that I want to ask. But first, in reference to what you were describing about your situation with your children there, Mr. Watson, I think you, somewhere along the line, you said something about it was, you didn't realize it, but it was devastating or something to that effect.
I realized it the whole time. It's been devastating, no doubt.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's the socialization, I think, that is the main difference. We talked briefly about this earlier, about the difference between learning at home as opposed to going to school. And I think that's one reason that we have had this tremendous response once they saw how it was. Now, it may get much worse with flu season coming on, and nobody can predict that. That is a fact. But nevertheless, I've heard several experts talk about, or so-called experts, talk about on TV about that kids were resilient. Younger they were, the more resilient they were. And in many cases, some could have it and, recover from it quickly and never know that they had anything because they're young and energetic. Would you disagree with that, Dr. Buchanan?
No, sir. Certainly, we don't see a severity of disease like we do in adults and children, although we certainly see severe disease. There have been at least 11 hospitalizations in Knox County for children with COVID. That's not a high number, but if you're a parent whose kid ends up in the ICU at Children's, that's a high number.
Well, let me ask you this while you're up there. Don't go off. If these kids are quarantined, I know you have tracing and all that stuff, but what assurance do you have that they go home and they stay home for 14 days?
Well, actually, they are contacted at least every other day, if not every day, by our contact monitors. That's the word. So we have folks who are monitoring contacts of cases and asking them. We have to trust the parents because obviously we're not asking the kids, we're asking the parents.
You do it during normal business hours?
Yes and no. We have staff who are kind of staggering time right now, and we're doing it 7 days a week. But we have to take the word of the parents, and that's just like everything, a lot of other things that we do. When we have a tuberculosis case, we have to take the word of the people that are in quarantine, waiting their TB results, that they're staying home and doing what we ask them to do. It's like a lot of public health. We rely on the public to do the things we ask them to do and have to trust that they're doing those things. We do have some authorities to, if we know for sure they're leaving or they're doing things we've not asked them to do, we have some authorities. We don't exercise those willy-nilly because we realize that that's really not in the best interest of our community to do that.
So bottom line is, the answer would be no, that you do not have any way of monitoring them 24 hours.
No, sir.
Particularly if the parents were willing to say that they were there.
Yes, sir.
You know, they could leave 7 o'clock at night, not come back till midnight,
They sure could.
and I would guess some of them do. Now, not all. There are some strict parents out there, and I'm not getting on the parents or anything. The point I'm trying to make is there's no, what you all are doing, I'm not condemning it, but I'm just saying it's not a foolproof system. Let me ask you one other thing.
Yes, sir.
To the best of your knowledge, with kids under 18, have we had any deaths in Knox County?
No, but that I actually can say for sure we've had no deaths in Knox County of children under 18 from COVID.
Have we had any extended serious illnesses from COVID that lasted longer than a normal span?
Yes, sir.
To your knowledge?
Yes, sir, we have.
How many?
I don't know that number.
Well, I mean, is it 10 or 10?
Well, there have been 11 children hospitalized, and it's less than 11. But
Okay.
some of those children have developed this severe inflammatory disease that can happen in children after they have COVID.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be hateful, but that's what I wanted, was some kind of solid number.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Christie?
I just have a couple of comments and a couple of questions for Dr. Buchanan. The first is, I agree with Ms. Babb. I mean, parents made their decision based on our current protocols. You know, for both. I mean, some parents were afraid that their child might be quarantined multiple times and just decided to opt for virtual. So, you know, I don't think that we could even, I wouldn't even want to entertain changing anything if we didn't open that window back up. And my other concern is for our teachers. You know, last semester they had the option of taking a leave of absence. And is it correct, Mr. Thomas, they don't have that option this semester?
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
So to loosen up the restrictions, but then not give them that same option to, you know, take that leave of absence, I don't think that's fair to them either. I think that would be something we would have to look at. I know that one of the emails we received suggested that teachers could wear N95 masks. And I'm curious, Dr. Buchanan, you don't hear much about PPE these days.
An N95 mask is really only indicated when you're doing a medical procedure that causes aerosolization. So you have to be fitted for it. You have to wear it properly. It's much more uncomfortable than a procedure mask or a cloth mask. They're really not designed to be worn long term. They're designed to be worn for the time period you're doing that procedure, and not worn all day long.
So that would not be a good solution.
No, it's not a good
for
solution.
our teachers
Not at
to
all.
wear those
No,
all
ma'am.
day. And I guess my other question for you is, and it kind of goes along with what Mr. Watson and Ms. Owen pointed out, we really don't know how many of these children tested positive for COVID.
We don't.
I mean, we know how many tested positive, but we don't know how many actually.
Right. The contacts have tested
Right,
positive.
because, I mean, I know you mentioned at the retreat there was some resistance in getting tests, especially parents with younger children who might not get as sick with it, because they do have that fear of quarantining for 24 days,
Absolutely.
and they need to go to work.
And we've continued to see that resistance among athletes, especially in high school, for testing. So we've continued to be told by athletes who do end up getting sick and getting tested that, you know, they didn't want to get tested, and that they've been told their parents would rather they not get tested. And I get that. You want your kid to stay in school, and if it's his his or her senior year, you want them to play that sport they've been playing for however long they've been playing it, and have those successes and wins and have that good time with their team. So I get that. So it's an interesting time. It's very interesting. I can't wait to see all the stuff published about all the psychology of all of this.
And I guess my other question is, and I have no doubt that this affects learning. I mean, I know that, you know, we want our kids in school, and I want our kids in school. But do we, when you talk about those numbers of failing students, do we really know that exact number? Because I know there's some different ways the teachers put grades in their grade books where, and I don't know if Dr. Roswick, you could speak to that, because I know we've had a lot of, I mean, I know sometimes they'll mark them as in where, you know, it doesn't reflect a 0. So our data might show that they're passing, but I don't believe all teachers use that system, do they?
No, I think you're, I'll say this first. Thank you, Ms. Christie. I'll say first, I mean, the numbers are the numbers, but there are lots of stories behind some of the numbers on the failing. I kind of made a list of some things as we looked into those that may help out. So, you know, we have a lot of different factors in the virtual part, and what you're referring to is, especially in the high schools, lots of times it's kind of the full semester that takes place. So if students have missed assignments, there's lots of times that a teacher will put a 0 in for that, knowing that the student can go back and make that up at some point. But teachers don't want to like give a pass for that and have a student with a B, and then at the end of the semester load all the zeros in, and then, you know, the kid's failing all of a sudden. They'd rather show the student where they're at that time in the 9th week or something like that. So then the student, you know, has a chance to make that up and feels urgency to get that done. So that is true, especially in the high schools. You'll see some of that. I think there's some other factors too in our virtual, especially in our elementary virtual quest. 25% of those teachers, this is their first teaching job with us. So, you know, typically your year 3 is where you start seeing, you know, some of that happen. Now, they're doing great work. They're, you know, we have some, you know, rock stars that are doing some great things there, but, you know, we've been doing in person for a long time, and I think in 2 to 3 years we'll probably be able to say we feel like that, you know, that it's at that level. Some other things that are there too. I mean, we know, and I know at the board retreat we talked about, and again, we'll make sure this is not every student who's in virtual, but stereotypical of the folks who chose virtual when we looked at past performances on state tests, more of them were in the bottom 50 percentile on those tests. Most of the in-person students, the higher peak of that was in the upper 50 percentile. So, you know, again, some of that is that we do know there was learning loss, as Mr. Watson has said, from March and not having school. So we've talked about our virtual failures being higher. Our in-person numbers are higher too on the failure rate, and we knew that, you know, I think everyone in the country knew that was probably going to happen. So again, the numbers that Mr. Thomas has shared are correct numbers. But there are some stories behind those numbers, and our REA team is tracking that right now to have some, you know, more insight into that by the end of the year to see where those are. So I think that's a good point.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Roswick. Ms. Satterfield?
Yes, I just want some clarity regarding what Putnam County did regarding, are we looking to just not communicate with the health department? Or are you looking to have our own quarantine system? Like what's the result?
Okay, what the 5, I think they listed 5 items that what they did, they deferred to the Department of Health for the quarantine process. They continued to inform all students, staff, families of close contact with COVID positive students and staff. It says this change will be continually evaluated and is subject to change with increase in spread. They will continue mitigation strategies such as the use of masks and social distancing when feasible, and that the isolation for COVID COVID positive students will not change. So those were 5 statements that they had in their resolution. Essentially, they were not passing on the names of student contacts if there was a positive case. That's essentially what their change was. So they were wearing masks, kind of the same as us.
Which, without passing on the names, then they wouldn't be able to identify who all needs to be quarantined?
They would, if there was a student in a class, they are notifying parents that a student in your child's class tested positive. Please be aware of this and monitor your child more closely, kind of message, I think. So the parents would get that information, but the school was not providing basically a seating chart, as the way our nurses are working with the health department to identify who would need to quarantine from school contacts. They're not doing that.
Got you. And I guess my next question is that if it does move forward and we do support what you're suggesting, what does that look like do we open it back up for parents who want to make a shift to changing what we required them to do last week, or just your insight?
I mean, I definitely see the point, that Ms. Babb and Ms. Christie made, because that is in our reopening plan as it is now. I don't know that we would necessarily open it back up, though. So when I look at this, it's a lot of, Ms. Owen, the number I have would be 13% of students. If the 50 to 67 with like roughly 40,000 students, it's probably 13% of students have been quarantined, and only 0.5% that we think have gotten COVID from an exposure at school. And of course, there's, everybody knows it's hard to know, where they actually got it. And it's, so there's definitely a piece of that that's anecdotal, but I think we still do have, some numbers that we have at this point that we can take a look at. Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Watson?
2 things. One is, I think it's important for us to realize that we're not talking about a closed system here when we talk about Knox County Schools. Our system interacts with a lot of other systems, including the family system. And I think it's also important to recognize that if we do something and we shift drastically in the way that we're contact tracing, and we don't let a family know, the reality is, although yes, we all, I think, are clear from the scientific data that kids are impacted way less by this than any other demographic. Kids aren't living by themselves. Like, they live with other people. And some kids live with, like, their grandparents, or some kids live with people who are asthmatic or who have other underlying conditions. And again, I think it's important for us to recognize the weight of any decision we make related to Knox County Schools, that it does impact our whole community. We would like to think that it doesn't, but it will. It will have some type of impact on the community as a whole. Dr. Reiswick, I have a question for you. And to me, it's the other side of this conversation. I have no doubt that you guys are working on this, but I would love for you to speak just a little bit to it. We have been quarantining, and we know that, and we've been contact tracing, and I know we've been looking at that and learning from that. How are we elevating best practices for our educators who are figuring out how to walk really well with those students who are experiencing that? How are we, because to me, it's either you shift the way you're doing contact tracing and quarantining, or you become more effective at supporting those who have experienced that, right? And I have no doubt that Knox County Schools is doing that and wanting to do that, but can you speak to a little bit to how you all as a team are trying to become more effective at walking with those kids?
Thank you, Mr. Watson. That's, so, a lot of this, we spoke to that kind of this summer about saying, in a typical, had this been a strategic plan to move to like one-to-one and to have these kinds of options for families, it probably would have been a multi-year rollout, right? And so the good thing is, I know Teresa Nixon and her department and the ed tech side, have been doing this work for about 8 years. So we have some one-to-one schools in the district. We do have a lot of those best practices that we kind of already had on the shelf, as well as a lot of lessons we've learned from those things. So I think for us to hurry and expedite all that through the course of the summer and the trainings, and again, Shannon and her team did a great job of laying a lot of that out. A lot of our principals and choosing who to do that. And just now we're getting some of the data on some of those kinds of things. Like one of those, I mentioned 25% of our Quest elementary teachers this was their first job. Well, at the in-school level of virtual, it was only 3%. So, there the principals made choices based on who had shown kind of a track record of being the best, teachers with technology and that sort of thing. So, I think we're learning now kind of as we track a lot of that. But we are sharing those things. I mean, there's still professional development that goes. Again, Teresa Nixon has about 5 different avenues of how she gets input from that. All teachers have the option to be part of that. They have collaborative sharing. A lot of it, again, we can't do in person, so a lot of that's through Microsoft Teams, or a lot of that's through different groups that share that. We have a group that has been meeting, again, for multiple years of principals and instructional coaches and teachers who have been sharing those ideas across the board. So, where we see best practices, we share those out. I think I might have told the story before that we, started the year Microsoft Teams, teachers doing whole groups in the elementary level, and then how do they do breakout groups and small groups? Well, initially we were logging kids off and then having certain ones stay on, and we're realizing other kids weren't logging on. So they figured out how to create smaller rooms to be able to toggle back and forth the whole group to that. So, I mean, it's those kinds of things that are working. Schools are using lots of different apps. We know like Class Dojo has been a big piece, Seesaw has been a big piece, like some different things. And so as we go out and talk, ones that are working at those schools, we're trying to support, scale those up, share those with other schools as far as that goes.
So I really appreciate that. And one of the things that I'm hearing, though, is I feel like you're specifically talking mostly to the virtual program. So what is it that we're uniquely learning about kids who are moving to quarantine and suffered a disruption? Because it's a little bit different than, hey, I'm in my groove, I'm doing virtual learning, all that kind of stuff. And to me, the deficits that I'm seeing, and there's not a whole lot, but what I am seeing is it's really on the communication side because of the disruption. It's like the kid tomorrow pivots real fast, parents aren't ready. Oh my gosh, who do I talk to? One of the things I saw just real practically is if you look in Canvas, my daughter looks like she has 20 things missing. If you look in Aspen, it's 3 things missing, right? So it's because it's where information's kept, how it's communicating. So is there any specific conversations about how we're supporting kids virtually who have experienced the disruption of quarantine, not people who are just in the groove?
Yeah, and I'll say, I mean, I have 2 daughters, both on their second quarantine right now.
Yeah.
So I've experienced that as a parent as well. It is good, and yes, so the quarantine was probably, of all the things we planned for, the one that was the toughest. So you remember our conversations early on where, teachers would be virtual or they would be kind of in person, and from the beginning our expectation was everybody, either way, was practicing our major tools of Microsoft Teams and Canvas and those sorts of things. So none of those expectations changed. Taking computers home, preparing for, especially the movement to inclement weather, those kinds of things, looking at that. But I think that the quarantine was the one that was kind of the in-between. We didn't know starting out. Was it going to be, 2 or 3 kids in a grade level at a school, and so it wasn't a huge deal, and the principals would be able to work that out with the teachers. So we kind of gave the schools a lot of autonomy because it's not that we didn't have a game plan, we never experienced it before. So what we've seen is a lot of the high school students can be kind of independent learners. I've seen it's kind of both ways. I've sat in a teacher's classroom this year that was doing both, where they had about 7 students who were quarantined and some who had chosen virtual, who had just incorporated that in. And, I asked that teacher, what was that like? Like, we weren't asking that. But the principal and the community had made that a decision that worked for them, and it was going great. She said the first 3 weeks were harder than I ever thought, and now I wouldn't do it any other way. So, I think it's based on just what's there. This particular school offers certain courses where they didn't have multiple teachers to go virtual and not. Other places we see it is kind of what you described, where they're able to put the assignments in Canvas, and then they kind of have a contact time on email and that sort of thing. But you're kind of governed, you're kind of working through that on your own as a student. It's hard for us. We can't, our teachers are going above and beyond, but we can't like contractually ask them to have 7 o'clock, hours or that sort of thing, because they're having their so it has been a little tougher. And with that, we don't have extra teachers to kind of say, when you go quarantine, you go here, because then you've got to, 10 days, but that may be, 7 classroom days, and it's not worth pulling you off that teacher's roster and pulling them back out. And most teachers are saying, just let me keep the kids, let me keep them and try to support them as best I can instead of sending them somewhere for, 5 to 7 days and then bringing it back in. So honestly, that's probably still in development stage, and we're seeing it different and not treated the same way everywhere. Probably what's working best is, again, what we know all along is the teacher who has the relationship, who can continue to work with the student. But we are also aware that we can't, ask them to teach on both platforms all the time, every day, and plan for both. So it's kind of a catch-22 where we're at with that right now.
Okay. Any other comments, Ms. Satterfield?
Yeah, I just want to put this comment out there. Like, I actually overheard a conversation with some parents speaking and saying that they opted to just switch to virtual because their kid had been quarantined so many times, and the kid was failing the courses because they weren't prepared for virtual. So I do see that part, and I do hear that part. And I believe that my biggest hang up is that if we make this switch and this change, our schools are in somewhat of a groove of doing school during a pandemic. And if we make this change, I'm fearful that this might be the straw that breaks the camel's back for some of our teachers. I'm getting a lot of reports from my district, specifically from principals, just saying that we're pretty much at our wits' end when it comes to staffing people and teachers and that process. And I do believe the quarantine process goes into their reasoning, but it's already enough of a challenge that they're enduring right now, to where another shift right now, I personally feel it might just be too much. And so maybe this will be something we think about switching going into the spring semester, whatever it may be. And I don't know if that was the plan originally, but I think making that switch right now would be really, really rough on our schools. Not saying that I do support that we shouldn't be quarantined, it's a lie. But I just think the timing of the shift might just be too much.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Ms. Owen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't want to put our student rep on the spot, but I think it's important that we hear from her about how students feel, and I'll give her a second to think while I ask for something else. I'd like to request some information for the board, and I know we won't have this right now, but sometime in the next week or so, if we could have the total number of individuals who have been quarantined, as well as the total number of instances, so that we can tell whether that 5,200 number is the number of individual instances or if it is individual students. And if we could also see the numbers of students who have been quarantined multiple times, I think that would be helpful. If that's difficult to break out, that's not a big deal. I think it's more important that we be able to see whether we are looking at numbers of students or numbers of instances. Thank you.
Mr. Myers, I'm assuming you don't have that handy.
I don't have it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. Owen. Miss Abby, would you like to speak?
Sure. So I'm a virtual learner, so I haven't been quarantined. I mean, technically I have. But I would say, just from what I've heard, it's really hard as a student when you're consciously trying to do everything right. You're wearing your mask and you're social distancing, and then to be called into the office and told that you have to stay home for the next 2 weeks, which is something you weren't prepared for. I have a friend who was just sitting in his assigned seat in class and got quarantined because the person behind him had tested positive. And I think that as a student, you just want some explanation as to why you're being quarantined when it was just the person behind you and you've been all wearing your masks. So I definitely support quarantining, but maybe a change to how it's being done so that students are understanding why, and maybe getting better guidance during quarantine, because I know it's hard. It was hard for me to be a virtual learner for so long, and then to just switch to that for 2 weeks would be really difficult. So
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Mounds?
Yes, thank you. I just had a question for Dr. Buchanan. Dr. Buchanan, I thank you so much for being here, and I'm just trying to really understand this, but we've done so much in Knox County schools, I feel like, in Knox County in general, in trying to do the right thing, wearing our masks, social distancing. So given that the students are wearing their masks, that they're social distancing, the teachers have worked really hard to put that distance between them. We've had very creative ways of doing recess time to separate the students as well, while we still give them some fresh air, which we now understand really helps in vitamin D. We've got custodians going above and beyond. I guess my question is, with all of these things that we've done, how can we say that quarantining, and you can help me because I'm not a medical professional, it's just there's so many variables here that I don't know how we can say that quarantining is making a difference in our low numbers. Does that make sense? Because
Sure.
We've also got the masking, we've got the distancing, we've got...
But what we also know from years and years and years and years and years and years of public health experience is quarantine works. It's quarantine plus all of these other things that are helping to keep numbers low in Knox County schools. We know that. There's tons of evidence that quarantine works, not just with COVID, but with several other things. If you don't get exposed to a disease, you can't get it. So that quarantine works. And so, the challenge is, and this is not limited to Knox County schools, I'll be honest. If you are in a work scenario and you are closer than 6 feet from your coworker, and you both are wearing masks, you're still going to be quarantined. So we're not treating the schools any differently than we treat the rest of the community. And trust me, the rest of the community is struggling with this as well. And yes, masks work. They reduce risk. They don't eliminate risk. And that's the reason the CDC has continued to say, even if both people are wearing masks, if one of them becomes a case, the other person has to quarantine, because it doesn't totally eliminate the risk. It just reduces it. And, if we get the data to support a change in quarantine for students or workplaces or, whatever, we'll be happy to implement that. We just don't have that data yet.
Is there, and I know that this is a totally new experience, but is there a time in the history that you can remember that we've quarantined healthy people? Or has it always been in the past that we quarantined the sick?
You only quarantine healthy people. You isolate sick people. Okay. So isolation is when you have the disease and you have to stay home until you're no longer infectious. Quarantine is you've been exposed to the disease. You need to stay out of circulation for the incubation period of the disease to see if you get it, so that you don't make other people sick.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your comments on that. I would like to say I've listened to the board very attentively, and I think we've had some great discussion. And I do hear what you're saying, Ms. Babb and Ms. Christie, and it may be too late as we're looking at this because our window has already been closed, and we don't want to catch parents off guard. So even if the board decides to make no change based on the comments that I've heard or on the portal window being closed, I still want the board to continue to look at this. I'm not opposed to quarantining. I just think we need to quarantine less students, and I don't know how we do that. I just don't think we wholesale quarantine. And I think we have to have very good reasons, and I really appreciate the comments of our student rep, because you made a whole lot of sense. And I think we have to have a good basis for why certain students are being quarantined. I don't think we can just, to me, and I will look forward to Jennifer's request, but I still feel like even if it's 10%, 5,200 kids, if that's the number. And some of those may be duplicates, I'm sure they are, but that is still a significant number given right now what we have, the kids that have tested positive having been quarantined. So I just would like to work with the health department to see that we can get those quarantine numbers down. I'm not opposed to, I want the parents to know, I want us to do our best job, but I do think the quarantine numbers are extremely high, and we could develop a process that would limit that to where we're not quarantining as many kids or multiple times. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bounds. Ms. Christie, and then Mr. McMillan.
Just a couple of questions. I guess for Superintendent Thomas and Mr. Dupler, is it possible to open the window, the portal back up, or to give teachers that option of taking another leave of absence? And I guess if not, my question would be to Mr. Dupler, are there any legal concerns with us changing the way we do things after we have closed that window?
Thank you, Ms. Christie, Madam Chair, members of the board. And I may call on Mr. Trent or Dr. Riswick too to help me with the scheduling. The whole point of getting this out early was to give our principals more time and our teachers, our schools, to develop the schedules and the courses for the spring semester. So I'll let one of them comment on that. I'm thinking it's going to be pretty difficult at this point to open it back up and still be able to get the schedules, but certainly we'll do whatever the board, is asking us to do in that regard. So as far as the leaves are concerned, we can open that back up. The issue would become obviously finding teachers to take the place of the teachers that would take the leave, if there would be a significant number. I think we had 52, 3, 4 teachers who took the leave of absence without pay. We had, I believe, 6 or 7 of those have submitted, I think, a resignation rather than come back. And then we've had some who have taken medical, their conditions allowed them to be eligible to take a medical leave for spring semester. So, and then we've have some coming back. So obviously the concern would be filling the positions. But Dr. Riswick, if you want to comment on the scheduling piece.
I'll be quick, but I'll say too, kudos to Danny and Julie for both. They've been very proactive with their principals. I know Danny's had a full day with high school, socially distanced, 8 at a time, in a huge room. But doing that yesterday, both Stanley and the IT team has been very much as well. But what Mr. Thomas said is exactly correct. I think our net's about 5,100 students roughly moving back in. Still have about 13,000 virtual kids, so it's still a lot. But now comes the time of figuring out that second semester master schedule and what do you collapse and what do you not. And Mr. Thomas again has been great to challenge to make sure that as hard as everyone's worked, that they take some time over the winter holidays to not be working on schedules every day. So we really we feel like it'll be tight, but I think we can probably get there. And I'll let Danny come up and add to that.
Good evening.
Good evening.
We met with high school principals yesterday and middle school principals, and we talked about scheduling. Both Stanley and the IT department shared the information and the numbers, and it's going to be a huge task. This summer you all were gracious, and we extended that time frame for 2 weeks, and I'll tell you right now that saved us. We could have never got schedules ready in that amount of time because, we usually build schedules. We start in February, and it takes us through May to June to get the schedules finished. So, we asked schools to do schedules in the span of about 3 weeks, and they pulled it off. Right now, I think the problem we're facing with, November the 11th, we've got about 5 weeks until the break, 6 weeks, give or take. Our counselors who actually do a lot of the scheduling, we also have testing coming up, all the things that roll into the year, and Janice is here, and she could tell you how much our counselors are dealing with social and emotional stuff. We've got kids hurting. We've got kids hurting at home on virtual, and we've got kids hurting in person. So I can speak to this because my daughter's a counselor, and she gets to school, and from 7:30 to 4:30, she's either talking to a kid or talking to a parent. So, in the meantime, then, her principal says, well, let's build a master schedule. And not just her, but a lot of these counselors are taking this home, and they're working on schedules all night long. The numbers did not look too bad for the majority of schools, but if you've got over 100 changes, that's a huge task. And some of you, each one of you have got kids in school, or you've had kids in school, you know what that means. It could mean that we are changing teachers, and the blood pressure starts going up. If you get that call and I say your teacher's going to change, You're upset, mama's upset, daddy's upset, everybody's upset, so we're trying to deal with that. I really think, and I get what Ms. Christie's saying, that we need to stick to what we have, but at the same time, we've got to do what's right for kids. And I think if Ms. Christie called me with her kid and there's something just extreme going on, then we always take into special consideration and try to do the right thing. But I do think the majority of principals want to stay the course with what we've set forward, and just between what we have to do between now and December 18th is going to be a huge monumental task. And they will get it done. And the superintendent's been gracious enough. If we have to have some people work over Christmas, we're going to compensate them. But I can tell you right now, we'll have to have that. Any questions?
Thank you. Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. According to what Mr. Trent said, one of my questions was going to be, how many days do we have left first semester? Apparently, it's something in the high 20s or around 30. Does that sound reasonable? Anybody know?
The number of school days?
What?
The number of school days that are left?
It would be somewhere in that range. Okay. It doesn't really matter whether it's 26 or 30 from this perspective. Would there be any interest among the board members in reducing the remainder of the semester and seeing how it worked? Just for the remainder of the semester.
Reducing
On the quarantine.
the number of days of quarantine. So reduce it from like a 14-day quarantine down to a lower number.
Yeah. Would there be? I'm just asking open-endedly, is there any interest among the board members? I know there's not with a couple of you, but there may be with some others, may not. If not, we'll move on.
Okay.
Well, Dr. Buchanan, thank you.
Go ahead, Ms.
Dr. Buchanan, you stated that the quarantine's purpose was to make sure that those people did not develop symptoms. So can we shorten it to 10 days versus 14 to make sure that those people have not developed? How long does it take for sure to develop a symptom?
14 days. The incubation period for COVID-19 is 14 days. So quarantine is always for the length of the incubation of the disease. And yes, many people develop symptoms or test positive sooner than that. However, there still are people who do not develop symptoms or test positive until the end of that period. So the incubation period for COVID-19, as we know it now, is 14 days. So shortening that, there's no scientific data to support that. And you run the risk of the same thing of not quarantining at all, that you'll have kids coming back. As we know, children come to school when they're sick, just during flu season and other times. So there's no scientific data to support doing that.
Okay.
Ms. Bounds, anything else?
I forgot my thought. Go ahead, Mr. McMillan.
No, I was just-
Did you have a question for her?
I was just going to make the comment that, with all due respect to Dr. Buchanan, she is a health professional, but contrary to what some people believe, she does not have authority over the school system. As a board, we and the superintendent have control over it and say so. And, if we reduced it, we certainly have that within our power. Do we not, Mr. Dupler, to reduce it?
Mr. Dupler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. McMillan. And I can address Ms. Christie's question, if you would like. But so the board is granted its power through the state and through the charter. So the board does have exclusive control over the school system. Naturally, the board works with the state health department and the Knox County Health Department with guidelines and recommendations, but Mr. McMillan, you're correct. I mean, the board does have the power collectively.
Thank you. Nobody said anything about that, we wouldn't continue to work with them. But I think there's some people in the community, as well as on the board, are tired of them being dictatorial. And just whatever they say, they act like it's just the gospel truth, and they know more. They do know more about, that aspect of it, but we've, as we were talking a while ago, there are a lot of kids that are resilient, and, if I had a kid in school, I would much prefer him have the opportunity, if he or she got quarantined, to have it at a reduced number. I've even heard some places where they were tested and letting them go back after 9 days. But,
I remembered what it was. Dr. Buchanan, and I'm sure some of the other board members have as well, I continue to get calls from parents about their kids being quarantined beyond the 14 days. Can you help explain that to me? Because from the time of the contact tracing and time they contact trace and contact the parents, the last parent I heard from, it had been 8 days since the kids' contact at 3:30 in the afternoon with that student. But they were on, so it extended that quarantine well past the 14-day period.
Without specifics, I really don't want to.
Do you want me to start forwarding those emails to you?
No.
Okay.
But
I've heard more than once that it's, and I don't know. I can't speak to it either. I just have received more than one email from multiple people about their kids being longer than the 14 days.
There's a lot of nuance to quarantine, and
right.
that
okay.
I can't speak to without knowing specifics.
Theoretically, if a student is exposed on a Friday and they're notified on a Wednesday,
it starts on Friday.
When they were exposed?
Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right.
Can I make a comment in reference to what Ms. Bound said? Now, I don't want to belabor this, but I mentioned it at the retreat about the class, and I still believe that she told me that they would quarantine everybody, and then they would turn the ones loose that didn't need to be quarantined.
No, sir.
What did you tell me?
If I did, I said that in error. I don't do isolation and quarantine, but here's the basis for isolation and quarantine. If Ms. Christie tests positive, anybody who's sitting within 6 feet or standing within 6 feet of her for 15 minutes, or less than 6 feet of her for 15 minutes or more, cumulative over a 24-hour period, would be in quarantine. So that would include potentially you, sir. I don't know how far away you are.
Probably.
But none of the speakers, because we're not up here that long.
Well, since you don't want to talk about specifics, I'll be a little more specific. This was a gym class where I would think it would be pretty open, and the father that I talked to of the young lady who was sent home for 14 days, they saw, and she said, I have never been in my life within 30 feet of that kid. But did they give her an opportunity? No. But they chose to allow 3 or 4 athletes that they were needed on Friday night. So they didn't, and I don't expect you to know anything about it. But it happens, and what Ms. Bounds is saying,
Mistakes,
can stand out.
Mistakes get made, yes, sir,
It can-
absolutely.
Well, it's not just mistakes. It's intentional things. And it's costing kids way too much time, just like what Ms. Bounds said. So,
Okay.
you know, I'm
Okay,
that's all I'm
yeah.
gonna say.
All right, thank you, Mr. McMillan. We really need to wrap this conversation up. I see a couple people still have mics down. Can you make a very, very short
Brief.
comment?
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Owen and then Mr. Watson, and
I would just like to suggest to board members that if there are very specific circumstances, if we will call and talk with Jason Myers, he will be very glad to look into those. Sometimes he already knows all of the circumstances and can explain exactly what went on. But if we have specific circumstance questions, he is very glad to look at that and investigate and find out what actually went on. Thank you.
thank you, Ms. Owen. Mr. Watson?
Yes, this is just in response to Ms. Bounds' comment earlier, which I think is very valid about bringing this conversation back to the table. I'm not necessarily talking about that we talk about quarantine all the time, but I think in a pandemic, I think it would be prudent of us to ask for more regular briefings from the health department for the school board. I don't think that has to be long. I don't think it always has to be dialogue, but 5 minutes every work session or something where you can get information everywhere. And I think it's important for us as a board to have a consistent line of communication. I certainly don't want to have the level of conversations that Mr. Myers is having and his team. I mean, I do not feel like I need that. But having some regular briefing where we have a more macro level understanding, especially when we're engaging in the community and the community is engaging us, I think we'll feel a little bit more confident, not trying to put ourselves in the position of a health expert, but to at least have some dialogue and be a little bit more confident in those responses. And I think along the way, when we do need to make decisions and pivot, we'll feel like we're not playing so much of a catch-up. So.
Thank you, Mr. Watson. All right, thank you all for the conversation. Dr. Buchanan, thank you for making time to be here and to have the conversation. We appreciate it, and we appreciate your partnership with the school system. Thank you. And Ms. Coatney, I'll turn it back over to you.
Item 13B, approve budget line item transfers for the period of March 1, 2020 through June 30th, 2020, in the amount of $532,897,000.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
13C, approve budget line item transfers for the period of July 1, 2020 through September 30th, 2020, in the amount of $75,350.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Babb. Discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
13D, approve tenure for eligible teachers.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Owen. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
13E, approve restoration of Human Resources Director of Advancement and Diversity position.
We have a motion by Ms. Satterfield and a second by Mr. Watson. Discussion. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
13F, accepts charter school monitoring report for Emerald Academy.
We have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Owen. Discussion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
13G, approve representatives for the Knox County Board of Education to the Collaborative Conferencing Management Team.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Christie, a second by Ms. Owen, was it? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
13H, approve resolution urging suspension of student achievement as a criteria for teacher evaluation for 2020-2021 school year.
We have a motion by Mr. Watson. Ms. Christie, was that you? Second by Ms. Christie. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
13I, approve schematic design for the new Lonsdale Elementary School by Rouse Construction, McCarty, Holsapple, McCarty.
So moved.
We have a motion by Ms. Satterfield, a second by Ms. Christie. Ms. Satterfield.
Yes, I have an amendment to the motion.
Okay.
Is that right?
An amended motion?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
That I would like to put forward. So this motion reads, the motion to approve the board's and superintendent's recommendation to adopt the schematic design for Lonsdale Elementary School to include an additional 6 classrooms for a total of 36 regular instruction classrooms.
Okay. We have a second? Second. Okay. Ms. Christie seconds that. Is that correct? Because she originally seconded, so she seconds your amendment. Okay. And discussion. Did you want to say anything, Mr. Watson?
Mr. Dillingham, if we add those additional 6 classrooms, I know the capacity is to add 10. We could add 10, and I know there's reasons not to do that for green space and that kind of thing. Does it prevent us from adding those additional 4 sometime in the future from a construction standpoint, or does it make it significantly more difficult?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Watson, it's still possible to do that. The difficulty comes in if a playground is put in place, and we're going to have to do something with it to move it out of the way. I'm not sure that in reality that with these additional classrooms that are being added now that we would ever have to revisit Lonsdale and add on again.
Sure. Also, do you have I know there's no way to tell until the pricing goes out, but in your full body of experience doing these projects, do you have some rough idea? Is it to the same square footage that is presented in the current project budget that we would be adding to the overall cost for these additional 6 classrooms? And if so, what is that on a on a maximum square foot basis? Does that make sense?
I will tell you this day and time, I cannot find anyone that will guess on construction cost. The budget that was provided for this project was actually put together as a greenfield project, not anticipating that it was going to be put on the city park and that we would have to incur the cost of demolishing the existing building and all of that. So. Right. At this point in time, I actually told the contractor the other day that adding these 6 classrooms that we're offering $32.50, but he didn't like that number.
So the current budget is a roughly $160,000 or $160 per square foot. Do you see any reason? Obviously, it could come back that it would be significantly greater than that.
I can name a number of reasons that it may be more than that. I don't know how significant it might be. Sure. One is the storm shelter that we're now required to put in. That was not included in the original budget.
Sure.
So, again, anecdotally, we're looking at a little bit less than 100,000 square feet with this addition we're talking about. Anecdotally, I've heard from Middle Tennessee that adding storm shelters on a 100,000 square foot building was adding roughly $1 million to it, between $1 million and 1.2. So you're looking at $10 to $12 a square foot.
Yeah, I guess I want to clarify my question a little bit. Does the existing classrooms are going to have the existing approved classrooms are going to have some basic value per square foot? There's no reason from a construction standpoint, the way these additional classrooms are going to be added, that those would bear any more cost per square foot than the currently designed rooms, correct?
If it is added on the front end prior to construction, it would be basically
so then that's to my second point. If we build these later, it will be higher, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's the point I was going after. Thank you.
Is that it, Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Babb.
And this is a Mr. Dillingham question, because we talked about this earlier. The storm shelter you're talking about has nothing to do with the 6 extra classrooms. That's going to be an incurred expense with or without these 6 extra classrooms,
Correct.
right? So it's an expense we are going to have to incur. We know that's going to happen. We know it's more expensive than we originally counted on. And then these 6 classrooms will just be the additional expense of 6 additional classrooms to be built on.
Now is definitely the time to add the 6 classrooms because including it in the overall project as we build it is going to be the least expensive way that we could ever do it.
Thank you, Mr. Dillingham. Any other questions?
I just want to reiterate the emphasis of including community input in the process as we continue to go forward so that they can have a sense of ownership for this building, because we know that when people are involved in the process and have a sense of ownership, it's taken care of a lot better. And so I don't want to continue to neglect the voices that will benefit from this school. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
The original motion, right?
Okay. So we need to go back to the original motion. Okay, so the motion's been amended. So that was to approve the amendment, correct? Now we need to go back and approve that. The 6 extra classrooms. So if you vote yes, you're voting to add the 6 classrooms. Any discussion on that? Okay. So all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item 13J, discussion about extracurricular groups from the points of fairness and equity.
Mr. McMillan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted us to talk briefly about, I guess, a lot of these things that we're going to talk about or think about would fall under the arts. They're all extracurricular, but I want us to see if we can come up with a way that we can treat everybody fairly, and if they don't have to wear a mask for this, then they shouldn't have to wear a mask for something else. Just 2 things: uniformity and simple fairness. And I would, if we need to make a motion, I will do something, but I would like to hear what the superintendent has to say.
Yeah, thank you. Superintendent Thomas?
As well as the board member.
Yep, just thank you, Mr. McMillan, Madam Chair, members of the board. This is an issue that we've been discussing as staff, our leadership team, over the last few weeks. And families, and I know you know this, families have been asking us to consider allowing arts groups, clubs, and other extracurricular activities that have been limited because of COVID. And this is, we're going into the next several months, beginning with, obviously, with December through spring semester. And our athletic teams have been competing this fall using a protocol that we adopted, and I think it's been fairly successful. We've had some issues, obviously, with some of the teams, but overall, I think it's been very successful. And, just like athletics, we recognize that the arts and extracurricular activities are an important part of our educational mission. And these activities help build relationships. They also help students to develop lifelong skills. I'll give you a personal example. My own physician was a product of my wife's program at Central High School for 4 years. And during one of my exams, he said, your wife, the 4 years of your wife taught me so much, that's allowed me to be successful in my medical career even. So the work ethic and the teamwork and what it takes to have a successful choir program was certainly, for him to say he's been practicing medicine for some time, done a very good job because I'm still here. And so I think it is important that we consider allowing students now as we move into the next few months to have these opportunities, because they're kind of a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for many of our kids. And so with this in mind, I wanted to tell the board and families that we're working on a plan that would align with our existing plan for athletics. I think, as Mr. McMillan mentioned, and fairness, that we need to look at this point in time. So, and I do believe that the last 2.5 months that we've had in-person instruction has helped us to implement health and safety measures in our buildings, and we know more now. We have a little bit better sense about how to promote the core actions to prevent the spread of COVID, so as we've had this conversation. So what I would like to propose is that we provide to you, I don't think it takes board action, but provide to you a plan by the end of next week that would allow us to enter into the next several months with in-person performances, in-school performances, and in-school activities. So that's comments I wanted to share with you. So
Great, thank you. Thank you. I know we've gotten a lot of emails and concerns about this topic, so I appreciate you looking into that and working on it. Any other comments on that, Ms. Christie?
Yeah, and while we're looking at that, I know, and maybe Ms. Lee, I don't want to put you on the spot, can speak to this, but there have been maybe some student requests at L&N for an event that...
Thank you, Ms. Lee.
Yeah, anyway, so I go to a school that doesn't have like football, basketball teams. So it's been difficult for us, I'm part of the SGA, to kind of plan events that we would normally have that really bring our student body together, because we don't have that kind of sports-centric event that would kind of provide a school spirit. So we normally have events like luau's or game nights that we can have, and we're not able to have those. And so we've been feeling kind of like other schools are having these sports events, and there are other schools like ours that are not being allowed to have events because of COVID. So we just kind of feel like there's an unfairness there, since there are events being held and then we're not allowed to have ours. So.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. So we can take that into account also. And I think also, I believe, would you be including maybe a look at clubs and those kinds of activities as we move forward toward the next semester?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Okay, anything else? Okay, and I think now then, thank you for that conversation. We will move to public forum. Ms. Babb?
Yes, Naomi Elliott. Is Naomi Elliott here? Okay, Samantha Taylor. And if you'll just state your name and county of residence, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
I'm Samantha Taylor. I live in Knox County. Superintendent Thomas and members of the Knox County Board of Education, thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak this evening. My name is Samantha Taylor, and I am a senior at Halls High School. I am an established member of the Halls High School Madrigal Choir, and while I am speaking to you on behalf of my fellow madrigals, I believe that I am also echoing the sentiments of many fine arts students across Knox County who are frustrated with how the school board has treated us during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Madrigals have a very rich 50-year history at Halls High School. We're the elite choir, made up of 36 talented and dedicated singers, and just as student athletes must try out for sports teams, as Madrigals we are selected through a rigorous audition process. We are dedicated to our craft. We practice 5 days a week during class time and then on our own outside of the classroom. Our director, Miss Elizabeth Williams, has proudly led the Madrigals for more than 15 years in concerts and competitions across the Southeast. During the fall semester under her direction, we are charged with learning more than 30 different songs. We spend months rehearsing and polishing our performances in order to uphold the outstanding reputation we have within the community, all for our Madrigal season. Madrigal season typically occurs during the first 2 weeks of December. The Madrigals, accompanied by Miss Williams, dress in 17th century Renaissance attire that we purchase on our own, and travel across the county sharing our talents and spreading Christmas cheer through our large assortment of carols. Unfortunately, last week we were told that we will not be permitted to have our Madrigal season this year due to COVID-19 guidelines and restrictions that are currently placed upon us. While we understand and acknowledge the importance of these regulations, we cannot help but feel unfairly treated and held to a standard that is not required of other programs at the school, namely those of the athletics department. One restriction is that we cannot sing or perform indoors. Where is the logic in this when sports teams can play indoors without masks, and yet we cannot sing inside even while masked and social distancing? Each venue has specific guidelines related to audience seating and spacing, which would allow our choir to safely perform. In addition, as Madrigals, we will certainly follow the 5 core actions as outlined by the Knox County Board of Health. We did comply with all of the guidelines necessary in order to perform outside on the Halls High School football field on October 22nd. However, Madrigal season takes place in December. We should not be expected to sing outdoors in potentially frigid temperatures while our audience, including elderly grandparents, must also sit outside in the cold. Secondly, it has been said that we are unable to travel for Madrigal season due to the current ban on field trips. Tonight, I would like to have clarification on how Knox County Schools defines a field trip. Last Friday night, did the Halls High School football team go on a field trip when they traveled 4 hours round trip on a bus to Bristol for a playoff game? And what about the middle and high school basketball teams? Are they going on field trips when they travel to their games within the county? I assume the answer to these questions is no. These are not field trips. These students are required to travel and participate as part of a team. As Madrigals, we are responsible for our own transportation to and from our events. We do not travel by bus or any form of Knox County transportation. Our parents do not fill out permission slips. We are expected to travel and participate as part of our group as well. Sadly, the only difference we have been able to identify between the Madrigal Choir and student athletes is money. You can ask any student involved in the fine arts. We are all keenly aware of the disparity between the value assigned to them versus the value assigned to athletics. The sports teams receive money from the school system and sell tickets and concessions to bring revenue back into the school, but we hold fundraisers in an event to finance our needs fully. Every performance we put on and every venue we visit is free and done for the sole purpose of sharing our gifts and talents to the community. Our talents may be different than the student athletes, but we are just as accomplished and should be given equal opportunities. Tonight, I'm asking you on behalf of the Halls High School Madrigals and our families not to take our Madrigal season away from us. We are just as worthy and as important as the athletes who train and play in their designated sport. To cancel our Madrigal season while allowing an athletic season to proceed would highlight the politics of education and what drives the decision making. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Shelby Wright. Thank you. If you could just state your name and county of residence, and then you'll have 5 minutes.
My name is Shelby Wright, and I'm with Knox County. Good evening. My name is Shelby Wright, and I'm a senior at Halls High School here in Knox County. I am here today to express my disappointment with the guidelines that currently prevent our band and choral programs from performing indoors and traveling to other locations. I have been a part of the Halls High Madrigal Choir since my freshman year, and singing is my passion. Each year, the Halls High School Madrigals travel around the community during holidays, spreading Christmas cheer to many churches and holiday gatherings. Our Madrigal season is something that we and the community in general looks forward to every year. While I understand that there are rules in place to keep us safe, I feel that these rules need to be revisited and revised. It is extremely upsetting for those of us in the performing arts to have to sit back and watch athletic teams participate in the activities they love while we are deprived of that experience in the name of health. I cannot understand why sports teams can get on buses and travel to games when bands and choirs cannot do the same. Athletes can travel, huddle together, and have all the experiences they love with some limitations, but the performing arts have been cheated of almost everything. Bands cannot travel to away games or do their usual halftime shows, and choirs cannot perform indoors, even with masks on. As a senior, I have looked forward to each and every season of my educational and choir experience, and to potentially have that very thing that I am most passionate about ripped away from me my senior year is unimaginable. I plan to major in music in college, and I consider the arts just as important as academics and athletics. Music offers something incredibly important: unity. Music is a universal language that can bring us all together, and I think we can all agree that is something we need right now. I find it hard to comprehend the fact that we are allowed to sing in our classrooms with masks on, but we're not allowed to perform indoors or travel, even with masks on. It logically does not make sense, especially when students like me witness athletes doing the very things we so desperately want to do ourselves. After months of sitting in my home waiting for the world to open, one of the things that kept me going was the thought of my senior Madrigal season and the ability to sing and perform again. Singing is my life. I eat, sleep, and breathe music. So when I learned that the probability of there being little to no Madrigal season or regular performance of any kind, it broke my heart. I speak on behalf of all my classmates and choral students across the county. Music keeps us going. Performing keeps us going. You have no idea how detrimental these inequitable rules to our students like myself. For those of us who are seniors, we will never have the opportunity to spread the joy of our voices with our classmates again, and that hurts the most. I pray you will take into deep consideration everything that has been laid before you today. Please let us perform, let us sing and play for our communities, our classmates, our parents, and for the joy it brings to so many of us in the arts. You have an enormous responsibility to ensure that all students across the county have access to a reasonable and fair education, and the arts are no less important. Remember, the excellence for every child requires that students are given opportunities, not denied them, and this decision will have an enormous impact on so many lives and educational experiences. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Micah Richardson. If you could state your name and county of residence, and you'll have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Yes, my name is Micah Richardson. I live here in Knox County. I'm a parent of 2 children, single parent, single father. I come here today not to deal with the problems that's befalling the whole world here with the COVID. My plight is before COVID, when my son first started school here in Knox County. The food that was given to my son, as we are Jews, was unacceptable. The pork for breakfast, the sausage gravy, the things that go against the dietary laws appointed to all Jews in Leviticus. And I'll read some of that. And I'll read Isaiah here, 65:3. It says, "A people that provoketh me to anger continually to my face, that sanctifieth in gardens and burneth incense upon altars of brick, which remain among the graves and lodged in the monuments, which eat swine's flesh and the broth of abominable things in its vessels." So these are some of the reason why I'm here. That's my main concern, is to ask or to make a proposal to eliminate pork products, anything dealing with things that go against the values and the beliefs of the minority that would be including the Muslims. As we know, there's a lot of immigrants coming from Africa that's here in this community now, and they're trying to grow roots into the ground here and bring their children up as well, without casting aside their beliefs and core values and their observances of abstaining from unclean meats. And but this has been a big issue. I've been waiting to get here for almost 3 years now. Here I am, praise God. So I would ask the board, and I wish the woman that was over the health department here would clarify what benefits come from serving children pork for breakfast. You got your sausage and biscuit for lunch. My kids, I have to send them to school with little money that I have from the government that supplies me with EBT and stuff, to get them Lunchables on the days where they have only peanut butter and jelly, and my son doesn't eat peanut butter and jelly. Or he only gets 1 cheese stick instead of getting however many he needs to supplement the pork butt roast, pulled pork sandwiches that are on the display for everybody to grab. And so this is why I'm here today, to just, I don't know, because my son had suffered these things, what legal steps I should take to get maybe this board to move in the direction of banning these unclean meats, not only for me, but for the minority of people that we should be all inclusive to and all thoughtful about, just because we're not all evangelical Christians here that think that Jesus Christ came and destroyed the the laws of God, which we know that's not true. There's many subjects that I have to come and talk to this board on. If God wills me to be here, I'll be here another month to voice many concerns and many ideas that would include people in the celebrations at school. There's celebrations of Halloween that I don't prescribe to, and I'm pretty sure many Muslims don't either, and some Christians don't either, but it's pushed forth in the classrooms. The Christmas, the Xmas I call it, it's not prescribed to any Jew, nor is it many Muslims, but they have assimilated just to be likened because they don't want to go against the grain. They don't want to be talked about. Me, myself, I don't care. I'm a worm. I'm dirt. I'm stubble on the ground. I don't have an accolade. I don't have a title. I didn't go to no college. I didn't get no degree. Only knowledge I have is that book, and that's what I'm going to teach my children. Because my salvation and everlasting life is more precious to me than silver or gold or any titleship here on earth. So, yeah, I wanted to voice that concern to start off and introduce myself. Thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'll be back in the near future, and I hope somebody will pick this up and maybe look into it further to see if this is something that needs to happen and need to change, because I don't see no health benefits in pork. Praise
Thank
God.
you very much for coming to speak to us. Ms. Tanya Coates.
Tanya Coates, Knox County. So first I would like to say Happy Veterans Day to my dad and my son and all that have served our country, because without them, we wouldn't have the privilege of doing some of the things that we have. So I thank them for their service today. But I also want to come today to say congratulations to the tenured teachers. It's really difficult, if you don't know, by the board to get tenured in the state of Tennessee. You have to have a 4 or 5 for 2 consecutive years after 5 years. And in the last 3 years, it's been really challenging to, when our scores are related to the TCAP scores or any high needs test, and our evaluations have been irrelevant for the last 3 years. So I'm very appreciative that the district has taken those steps to actually help our teachers obtain tenure. But I'm also here to say that we started a process today for collaborative conferencing. It was a special questioning or special polling started today. It started today at 7 o'clock this morning, and it's going to end next Tuesday around noon. And there are 7 things that I wanted you to be aware of, why it's important for us to come to the table, because I can't tell you thank you enough for having the last 3 contracts signed by you that you approved, that educators of Knox County approve of. And as Ms. Owen stated last year, we have come a long way from where we started from, where we couldn't even talk to each other. Well, I talked to Bob maybe, but it was really difficult to have a relationship that was healthy for this district, and it's proved some dividends. And I could say that through the insurance piece. You just did a great thing for teachers. If you can remember last month or whatever that was, it's just the reprieve that teachers know that they don't have to pay for the insurance, because that collaborative conferencing team that worked on that, we agreed, and we want to do what's best for everyone in this district. When we talk about fringe benefits, I can remember when I was about 25 plus years ago. I know y'all still think I look like I'm 25, but I'm not. But I know 25 years ago, we used to get paid $25 for our sick days when we got ready to retire. And now we're to the point, through collaborative conferencing, that we actually have an incentive program through fringe benefits to actually have $100 that we can buy up to a year of your salary. So don't think that we're going to pay out all of you out there that think you have over 300 some days of sick days saved up. It's only up to your salary. The grievance process, we actually are able to have representation anytime somebody feels like they are in trouble. Typically they're not in trouble, but can you imagine if you were ever called to the principal's office or called by the superintendent, and you think, what did I do? I mean, you lose your thoughts. So by having representation through the grievance process, this allows people to feel comfortable, have somebody else sit there that it's not against. I mean, I can go sit with Ms. Christie, and I can listen for Ms. Christie, and she doesn't have to worry about it. So that's the grievance process. Working conditions. The state of Tennessee passed 2.5 hours of plan time on contract time. And we haven't had any challenges, but it actually helps us to understand and make sure we're sticking to that. In regards to salaries, I don't know if you knew this almost in our last 3 contracts, but we were 37th in the state overall in regards to our salary in which we pay our employees here in Knox County. But because of our memorandum of understanding that we've had with our professional educators, we went from 37th to now we've moved up on that scale. And when you look at like districts as ours, we went from being number 5 to number 3, and we want to be number 1. The only way that we can do that is continue to have those conversations with the educators at the table. In regards to leave, we appreciate you giving us leave time. As part of that leave is that you did about 3 years ago, you added bereavement leave. We used to have to use our sick days for bereavement leave if our grandparents passed away, a parent passed away. So we don't have to do that because you made a commitment to add that to our policies. And last, we like to be able to have payroll deduction. I can't imagine having to write a check to my insurance company, to my eye doctor, and all these others. So all I can say on behalf of the educators, thank you for allowing us the opportunity to do that. And the process is going to end next Tuesday. Thanks.
Thank you. We would like to thank everyone who has come out for public forum today and for the students that came to speak about the performing arts. We look forward to hearing the recommendations from our executive team. I think you said by next week, we hope. So anyway, we appreciate everybody for coming out tonight and taking part.
Thank you, Ms. Babb. Do we have anyone who would like to make comment during board forum?
I do, but I just want to just share out with my community and Knox County as a whole. We've had a high number of violent crimes and a high number of our students being shot. And so our schools and our families and our communities are dealing with this. And so I just want to lift that up publicly to bring attention to that, because there's no reason that you have to go to school and, educate and then talk to the classmates about why your classmate has just been shot as well. And so just want to bring that to the radar, to give it public notice and let my community know that that is not something that we are taking lightly, and we're doing what we can to curb the amount of violence. But prayers and thoughts to definitely the families who are affected by this.
Thank you for bringing that to the board, Ms. Satterfield. Anyone else? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you.